Welcome to the Design Defect. Steve, what are we doing here today?
Jamie, today we're starting a 4-part series looking at launch titles for all of Sega's early consoles.
Exciting! So we're going to introduce people to my special blue and yellow friend, the Sega Pico.
What? No, we're looking at the Master System first. What's wrong with you?
Aw, but the Pico! Fine, take us into the first one. If you don't remember the nuclear war of the solar year 2000, then you also might not remember the UK launch title Transpot, the infuriating, side-scrolling Gradius-like game. It took me a ridiculous number of attempts at recording gameplay because I kept on getting the exact same power-up, the initial default weapon. Anyway, Daedalus, an AI leftover from a dead empire, is trying to give the survivors of the war a hard time. And it's up to you, the pilot of a CA-214 starfighter, to knock Daedalus and its minions back to solar year 2000, whatever that means. To upgrade the starfighter's weapon, the player shoots an arm capsule, picks up a power-up, then watches a selector quickly rotate between options A through G. Much like that weird 4-colored flashing light game at Chuck E. Cheese's, the player attempts to hit the button at just the right moment to stop the selector in hopes of getting a superior weapon, or at least not option A, which is the default gun. I almost always ended up with A through sheer bad luck. If the player ends up with a diffusion beam, sword fire, or two-direction fire, the ship transforms into a little robot that remains perfectly upright as it flies around the screen, dodging enemies and projectiles. Transpot has a catchy little song that loops over and over again. It's not the worst song, so it's bearable. Controls are good, and the graphics are okay. It's not the best of the launch titles, but it's certainly not the worst. All in all, I would rate this using a solid, blasé shoulder shrug.
Action Fighter was published and developed by Sega and came out on just about everything but the NES back in 1986. Clearly taking inspiration from Spy Hunter, I think the only subpar quality that Action Fighter brings to the table is the title. If the name Action Fighter could be used to label 99% of all video games, then I feel that this is the 1% where that name actually doesn't quite fit. Yeah, I know you're driving around blowing up cars with missiles and machine guns, but at its core, this just feels like a racing game with weapons. But let me get back on track here. This game is awesome. Just like Spy Hunter before it, Action Fighter is insanely fast and super fun in short bursts. I definitely prefer Action Fighter to Spy Hunter because of the variety of stages and the way the vehicles control. Speaking of vehicles, this game has a lot of them. The first stage alone lets you try out 3 of them, and honestly, I think it's pretty rad when they slap jet engines onto your car and you fly up into the sky. I'd love to tell you what all the vehicles are like to control, but I'm horrible at this game, and could only pass the first stage. Honestly, I don't think it would have made it very far if it weren't for the grace period each level offers you before it actually starts tracking your deaths. When this timer runs out, you better hope you have the current level figured out, because extra lives are scarce in Action Fighter. I was getting so frustrated not being able to see any more vehicles that I just considered it a win when I uprooted the computer's high score on the game. Here it is for proof. People throw around the term NES hard. Well, this is Master System hard.
In the UK launch title Black Belt, the player takes control of Ricky, who is on a mission to rescue his girlfriend Kyoko from the evil Wang. Black Belt was originally based on the anime and manga Hokuto no Ken, but without the benefit of the Hokuto no Ken license, forcing major graphic changes to avoid copyright infringement. You might be more familiar with the licensed English version of Hokuto no Ken, Fist of the North Star, which has an excellent fighting game by the same name for the original Game Boy in 1990. Now that was a quality brawler / fighting game worth every penny spent buying batteries to power my ever-hungry Game Boy. But I digress, and will continue to do so. Playing Black Belt has made me think of the Karate Kid for the NES. While Karate Kid has more varied environments and unique challenges, the actual gameplay of Black Belt is vastly superior. I've come to appreciate developers who took the time to ensure their games had sharp and responsive controls, which, unfortunately, seems to be fairly uncommon. Even taking into account that Black Belt is a Master System launch title, I found its scenery and characters bland overall, with the exception of the bosses. The boss fights exhibit what the Master System is capable of with smooth and colorful combat. These brief moments are the solid ground which the rest of the Black Belt bog surrounds. The music consists of stereotypical oriental sounding beeps and boops. While this game is a passable launch title, there are much better retro titles out there to sink a couple of hours into.
Originally called Teddy Boy Blues for the arcade, the Master System port removed all of the licensed material before coming to consoles in 1985. The title Teddy Boy Blues is the name of a song by Japanese pop star Yoko Ishino, and both the single and herself were featured heavily in the arcade version. The Master System port, simply titled Teddy Boy, is pretty much the same game, just with slightly smaller sprites and a lot less animation. The biggest difference here is actually in the bonus stages, which are essentially extensions of the normal levels for the Master System, whereas the arcade version lets you control Ishino and search for treasure inside her own house. If I had to pick, I'd go with the Master System bonus stages, as they just feel like they belong in the same game at least, however uninspired they may be. Each level is an endless looping maze, and you only die from touching an enemy or not killing all the enemies before the time runs out. One element I really enjoy is that if you stand in one place for too long, the platform you're on will catch fire and be removed from the level, encouraging you to either keep moving or strategically remove a platform for your own benefit. Certainly not a terrible game. I got some definite Bubble Bobble vibes while playing Teddy Boy, and while I know it was released about a year later, I personally would prefer to play that. Also, the Bubble Bobble song doesn't make me want to stab a knife through my ears after hearing it for longer than 5 minutes. So, Jamie, did you play anything so far that's going to distract you from the vast universe of No Man's Sky?
Steve, if you bring up No Man's Sky again, I'm going to close out Skype and quit the video.
Okay, I guess let's just jump into the next one then.
Fine. Of the UK Master System launch titles I played, Choplifter is my favorite. By the time Sega released it though, it had already been out in the wild for 4 years on the Apple II, some Atari systems, ColecoVision, and a couple of Commodore computers. In a background story reminiscent of Johnny Cash's Hot Rod Lincoln, the various helicopter parts used to assemble the aforementioned Choplifter were smuggled into the evil, bungling empire under the guise of being mail sorting equipment. The player is tasked with rescuing POWs by blowing the door off of holding cells and landing. POWs then dash, and I use that word loosely, to the helicopter while tanks creep up and try to blast the Choplifter while it's loading survivors. With a game that is teetering on the edge of being a bullet hell, the controls need to be sharp, and developer Dan Gorlin delivers. In contrast to the other launch titles, the music and sound effects of Choplifter are far superior, with the beat adding to the urgency of taking off with a full haul of POWs before the exceedingly delicate Choplifter gets sniped. The quality graphics are the most interesting and detailed of the launch titles that I have played. There's a lot going on while a player pilots around enemy aircraft and shots fired, and Gorlin does a solid job of using the pixelated graphics to their fullest extent, so that the player never loses track of the on-screen action. I was pleased to discover that I'd be rescuing hostages from a jungle, from inside a cave system, and from battleships. This is a good title that will scratch your retro itch in just the right spot.
Led by Sega's own Yu Suzuki and backed by the famed Sega AM2 development team, Hang On is one of Sega's oldest popular franchises. Originally created specifically for the arcade with a special cabinet that was designed to tilt similar to a sports bike, the Master System port of this classic does a solid job at bringing the experience to your living room, albeit trapped inside of an 8-bit console. While not as challenging as some other Sega classics, it does take some effort to master controlling your bike during some of the lengthy turns, and honestly, weaving between a couple of opposing racers while keeping your bite at a 45-degree angle can be very rewarding. I had a blast playing this game and may even prefer it to Outrun, and while I missed the map that shows my progress after each epic race, I was really impressed with how the background and even the time of day changed seamlessly on the little black box. It really does look great for a Master System title, and while I love the scaling effect, the only feature I wish this game had is the addition of hills. Though, after seeing how impressive the hills are in Outrun for the Master System, maybe I should just count my blessings. While the Master System version of Hang On may not be the best version of the game, you can certainly find far worse racing games on the console. In fact, the only thing I don't like is how barely clipping into any object in the game causes you to explode, yet the other riders just cruise on like nothing happened. I guess I can always revisit Road Rash if I want to exact revenge on my opponents and just pretend that I'm playing Hang On for the Master System instead.
Let me preface my review of the US launch title Safari Hunt with an admission. Steve and I cheated on this video. Safari Hunt is a light gun shooter, and a light gun shooter requires a cathode ray tube television to function. Modern TVs have a much higher refresh rate than CRT televisions and no longer use line tracing, so it's impossible to use a light gun with them. Therefore, I was forced to use an emulator and mouse to replicate the light gun experience. Safari Hunt takes you, the mighty hunter, on excursions to lakes, forests, and jungles to kill ducks, fish, rabbits, bears, armadillos, spiders, monkeys, bats, and panthers. This game is a nature conservationist nightmare. The title screen depicts 4 people carrying a dead alligator by a pole. However, you will not be given the opportunity to kill an alligator with a pistol. That being said, I was surprised to see the breadth of wildlife I would be tasked with killing in hopes of achieving the threshold score to advance to the next level. Safari Hunt expands on the light gun hunt genre popularized by Duck Hunt, which Nintendo released a couple of years before on the NES. Each slain animal has their own animation once shot, whether it's a duck's cooked corpse flying off the screen or a fish with X eyes holding up a sign with points. No music plays during the hunt, but the player is treated to a jaunty little tune between levels. Unfortunately, I am unable to describe the quality of the light gun experience itself. I feel that it would be much easier to use a gun though, as I found myself failing at using a mouse on what essentially boils down to a game where I'm clicking on animal pictures like a good boy. But I will blame that on not taking the time to calibrate my mouse to the wild hunt.
Before I dig into this review of Fantasy Zone for the Master System, I have a quick confession to make. This is the first time I've ever played the game for any format. Now that I got that out of the way, let me just say that of all the Master System games that we played for this episode, this is the one I'm most likely to come back to and try to complete at some point. It's just awesome. Released in March of 1986, Fantasy Zone was developed and published originally by Sega once again, though there were licensed and unlicensed ports that popped up shortly after its initial launch. While there were definitely some cutbacks from the original version, the Master System release of Fantasy Zone is an impressively faithful port on the 8-bit powerhouse. It doesn't have the radar, which indicates where enemy spawners are, and 2 of the bosses have been replaced, but overall, I wouldn't have been disappointed in the slightest if I was looking to experience the arcade version at home in my youth. While Fantasy Zone looks like it was designed for 6-year-olds, this game will kick your butt if you're not careful. It's fast and features excellent controls to complement the fluid gameplay. I love collecting all the coins when I blow up a spawner or a boss, yet I feel like most of the power-ups available in the shop aren't really worth it. The faster engines usually send me head first into a bullet, and all the weapons have a timer on them, so at least the ones I tried weren't really worth it. I was fine buying extra lives, but wow do they start to get pricey fast. Either way, if grinding for additional lives is the worst thing Fantasy Zone has going for it, then you can consider me a new fan of the series, and I can't wait to dive into other versions plus the sequels.
The UK launch title World Grand Prix caused my eardrums actual physical pain, but let me start with the redeeming qualities first. World Grand Prix offers 12 racetracks to choose from, each with their own meandering course and scenery. Luckily, this game has 12 track options, or it would bump race driving from the top of the worst racing games ever leaderboard that I keep in my head. The reason for this is that World Grand Prix is barely a racing game. To win, and really there are no true winners in World Grand Prix, the player must come in under a target time. If the timer at the top of the screen climbs too high and the single lap is not completed, the player will receive a game over message. No score will be presented, nor will there be any mention of how the player placed against competitors. The other cars in the game are obstacles to steer around, and placement does not matter. A bare-bones track editor does nothing to add to the game's content. And now for the audio. I cannot put into words how truly awful the screaming, pulsating noise of my unlicensed knockoff Formula One racer driving down the track actually is, as the sound waves abused my soundbar and screeched into my ear holes. The only relief you get from the cacophony is the menu screen, which is absolutely silent. No music, no sound effects. Unfortunately, this causes the beginning of the race to be all the more jarring as the car's tires screech for several seconds. While not the worst game I've ever played, it is the worst of the launch titles that I played.
So, Jamie, did you think the Master System had any killer apps at launch?
Choplifter rescued the Master System from Nintendo, helping the system take off?
Well, you know, Choplifter was also on the NES.
Well, Steve, we'll just agree to disagree. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Okay, see you guys next time.